Wentz steps up. Here comes the rush. He is going deep, and it is caught. And in for a touchdown, Deshaun Jackson.
Give the people what they want.
It is 3:22 p.m. on Thursday as we start this podcast. Carson Wentz still an Eagle. We're still waiting, and this is the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben and Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Rube, it feels like this is kind of like the Bryce Harper situation, but with the Eagles.
Yeah, I guess I don't even know what it's like. It's you know, he's just sitting here waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it could be a while. And you know, we got to keep coming up with stories that say Carson Wentz hasn't been traded yet. It's an unusual situation. It's an unprecedented situation, really. At some point, it's going to happen, but it could take a few weeks.
Yeah, and we'll kind of go through a little bit more of the Carson Wentz conversation in this podcast in just a few moments. Adam Hoge will join us from NBC Sports Chicago. So we'll get his take on Wentz and that potential trade destination. We will get into Jalen Hurts. I don't want to say he's the forgotten guy, but he's probably the starter if Carson Wentz gets traded. So we'll talk a little bit about him entering year two. And then we have a few stay or go positions to get to at the end of the podcast. We're going to get to running back, linebacker, and defensive tackle today. This Carson thing is interesting because early in the week, it certainly felt like, I guess really late last week, Saturday and Friday, it felt like this was going to happen. And then the Super Bowl happened, and then it didn't happen Monday. And you thought, all right. And then Tuesday, and now it feels like it might not happen for a while. And one of two things happened here, Rube. Either the trade talks cooled down significantly, or they were never really as hot as we were led to believe. And
I'll take option B.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a wise option to take. It kind of felt like the market was being drummed up a little bit in an attempt to get the deal done, and that's a fine tactic, and it's worked before, and it felt like it was going to work here with this Carson Wentz deal. But you have the two teams at the top, are the Colts and Bears. And we know the Colts situation, that they're a little more patient. Chris Ballard's never in a rush to trade draft picks. And then you have the Bears, who are they're not reckless, but I think that if you had to pick one of those two teams that would overpay, it'd probably be the Bears. And it seems like all the sides kind of stepped back and said, wait a second. Well, not all the sides. The two teams that would have traded for one stepped back and said, I don't think this market is really what you're saying it is. Obviously, the Eagles haven't gotten a trade they feel is worthy, because if they had, Carson Wentz is no longer an Eagle. I think that goes without saying. It's an interesting deal here right now because the Eagles are playing this like they have leverage, and I'm not sure how much leverage they have.
Yeah, it's like a big high stakes game of chicken here, and I would say a lot of times when there's a perception of, you know, talk stalling or that kind of thing, it's just a negotiation. This is just the nature of negotiating. And, you know, it's something that Howie's pretty good at. It's something that, you know, Ryan Pace and Chris Ballard, I mean, they're all good at it and they're all experienced at it. And nobody's going to make a move that doesn't benefit them. And when those Venn diagrams don't overlap, then there's no trade. So I don't think you're seeing things fall apart. I don't think you're seeing things stalling. I just think you're seeing a negotiation, and it's the nature of a negotiation that it's not going to get done. I mean, it never does. Rarely does, I should say, because you know, if you take the first deal that's offered, you're probably taking a bad deal. That's why it's a negotiation. You go back and forth. That's why you have guys who, you know, become free agents in March and don't sign, you know, contracts till August sometimes, because it just takes a long time to, you know, and usually there's some deadline that's there, that's looming, that makes it get done. And I guess the deadline here is March 19th or whenever, but, you know, whenever the $10 million is due. But I never felt like, despite everything that was being said, I never felt like it was imminent, because it didn't really make sense for it to get done that fast. Because Carson's value is difficult to measure. I don't think it's as high as, certainly, I still don't think they're going to get a first round pick for him. I think it'll be a 2 and something else. Obviously, Eagles they started out asking for multiple ones, which they're never going to get. We don't know what the counter offers have been, but his season makes it really hard to define his value. Where I think Jared Goff and Matt Stafford, everyone kind of knew what they are. They haven't had an anomaly of a season. Goff has played poor the last couple of years, but Stafford's been really consistent. But we'll see. The Rams really wanted Stafford, and the Lions really wanted to get rid of Stafford. So that kind of took care of itself. But at some point this will get done. But the longer it goes, the more you realize. I think Carson's value is not what the Eagles think or what they want, and the demand for him is not as high as some people might think.
Yeah, and it is hard to put a value on Carson, and like we've mentioned on previous pods, the Goff-Stafford trade did the Eagles or the Bears or Colts no favors because it's hard to isolate either quarterback in that deal. There's a lot of variables to this, and it makes you wonder if, in addition to picks, there'll be players involved from either side. I think that would be a way to negotiate this one if it's not pure picks. It's tough. It's a tough deal to figure out, and I'm not sure which way the value is going to go. There's two schools of thought here. The longer you wait, other quarterbacks might be on the move. For right now, it kind of feels like the NFL is waiting to see what happens with Wentz, but if it goes much longer, the NFL is going to go on. There are going to be other trades, and we've heard some of the names out there. Sam Darnold, a very real possibility. We've heard Marcus Mariota, a backup right now. It could possibly be moved. So those deals, if they happen, it could go one of two ways for his value. It could either raise it or lower it, depending on what those guys get dealt for and which teams they go to. Because right now, it seems like there are really two teams in on Wentz, and there might be more kind of monitoring it. But if the Colts trade for Sam Darnold, for instance, what does that do to Wentz's value? Logically, it lowers it, but it also means there's one less quarterback out there. So maybe the Bears then feel more pressure to trade and pick up Wentz. So I don't know how you read it, honestly.
Mariota is an interesting case because I think he's similar in some ways to Carson. They were both the second pick. They both started out their careers pretty hot. They're both 27. They've both been benched. So they both had adversity late in their careers. It's an interesting parallel. I think Marcus Mariota's decline was kind of a gradual one since 2000. 18 or so, but it's an interesting comparison.
Without the peak.
I'm sorry?
Without the peak of one.
Didn't have the peak, but, he was pretty good in 16 and 17. He wasn't as good as Carson, but, that 1 year in 16, I think he had 27 touchdowns, 9 picks, threw for 3,500 yards, won a playoff game. So he's done things that Carson hasn't done. He's played in the playoffs 3 years. So, it's an interesting comparison. I've always liked Mariota. I don't know. I don't know who's better right now. I don't know who's got a better future. I just have no idea. And that's what makes it. I think if you're a team looking for a quarterback, you probably feel the same way. Who would you rather have? Who would you rather have be your opening day quarterback in 2021? Marcus Mariota or Carson Wentz?
Carson Wentz.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I still kind of lean toward the ceiling, and I still think Carson's ceiling's higher, and that's the way I kind of look at quarterbacks.
Their career passer ratings are exactly the same. They're both 89 point something. It's interesting.
That's wild.
That's wild. It's that's wild. Shut up about passer ratings.
Another point, you mentioned the March 19th. It's not a deadline. It could be a deadline. $10 million owed in a roster bonus. It's not like that's a hard deadline. The Eagles would prefer to not have to pay him $10 million if they're going to trade him a week later. That doesn't make any sense. So sometimes those sort of deadlines spur action. but it doesn't mean that it necessarily will.
Right. Right. No, that's true. And I think we touched on this, and I think I don't know if I'm supposed to give away secrets, but I think you have a story.
You can go ahead.
There's the notion of bring Carson to training camp, let him and Hurts compete, hope that Carson plays well in preseason games, assuming there are preseason games, there should be, and increases his value. People say, all right, he's healthy, he can run around and make plays. I think, gosh, a guy like Carson in a preseason game should be able to play pretty well. And then you do like a Bradford deal where at the end of training camp, you trade him then. And by then teams are more desperate for a quarterback. It's a risk because then you kind of paint yourself in a corner where you have to trade him. And teams know that. But if a team likes what they see in Carson, they might be more willing in August to give up what they won't give up now. So I don't think that's going to happen, but it's an interesting scenario to think about.
Yeah, and I guess that's a card that how Reuben can try to play is tell teams, I don't have to trade him.
It's not his $10 million.
Well, I mean, the $10 million. If you could tell Jeff Lurie right now you can buy a first round pick for $10 million, they're buying. So to me, if that doesn't matter as much as I don't know how you can.
Jeff, I'll pay you back. I'll pay you back. Okay, Howie.
I don't know how you can do it though. I understand that his value could rise and it will be a gamble and maybe that gamble pays off, but this team, it feels pretty clear. Two things are clear, right? That Carson Wentz doesn't want to be here, right? He just doesn't want to be here. The Eagles have made it pretty clear that they're willing to trade Carson Wentz and that they're trying to trade Carson Wentz. It started off that they're listening to offers, but I think in the last week it's become pretty clear that, yeah, they're trying to trade this guy. So how can you go from that to then, sorry, Carson, you got to come to training camp and compete and we're going to try to trade you, but you got to compete first for a job and then there's so many, like, how do you tell Jalen Hurts that you got to compete with this guy we've already tried to trade? It means you're not going to get all the first team reps. It means that you're going to have a weird locker room dynamic. Sorry, Nick Sirianni. You got to deal with this now too. You got to deal with the team and a weird locker room and two quarterbacks.
The new head coach needs to deal with is that sort of quarterback drama and atmosphere. So, yeah, I mean, from that standpoint, you could do it, and you could just hope that Nick Sirianni rises above it and the team rises above it. But that's a distraction. I mean, every question to every player after every practice is going to be about Carson and Hurts.
I don't even think it's about like the media attention as much as it's like those things are real in a locker room.
That's true, but I mean, that's just going to be the overriding theme of everything during the summer.
It's hovering over the organization. And you can draw the parallel to the Sam Bradford trade in 2016, but it was a different circumstance. They really were prepared to go into that season with Sam Bradford as their starter, and they would have done that if Teddy Bridgewater didn't get hurt.
Yep.
That's a different situation. They were truly willing to keep Sam Bradford. I don't know how they can truly be willing to keep Carson Wentz. And this is not to say that in an ideal world, Carson Wentz wouldn't come back and they wouldn't fix him and they would kind of move forward with this thing, because ultimately I still think Carson Wentz has the higher ceiling, is the better player than Jalen Hurts if you can fix him. I have no confidence that it's going to get fixed. So to do that would be foolish to me.
Yeah, I just think it's more trouble than you need. And I can't imagine any scenario where that happens. I think he's going to get traded before March 19th, whenever it is. I mean, I agree that that's not it's not a absolute deadline in the fact that I think you're absolutely right. Jeff Lurie would trade $10 million for a first round pick any day of the week. I just don't think it's going to come to that. I think he'll be traded in the next few weeks. I hopefully sooner than later. Hey, let me tell you about the Philadelphia Eagles Dream Vacation. Tickets are selling out quickly for the Philadelphia Eagles Fan Cruise. Now, the ship sails March 2022, about 13 months from now, for 7 days and 7 nights with Eagles fans and only Eagles fans. Book your tickets today at PhiladelphiaEaglesCruise.com.
As we continue our Carson Wentz talk, we bring in Adam Hoge from NBC Sports Chicago. Adam, how are you?
I'm good, guys. Yeah, this has been a crazy week. It's been nonstop Carson Wentz here, too.
Yeah, I think we're all starting to get a little Carson fatigue in Philly. What's it been like in Chicago? What's kind of the talk around town about the possibility of Carson Wentz landing there?
Well, I think it's actually probably being celebrated that it's taking so long, because I think the original feeling was that the Bears were rushing into this a little too quickly. And some of that early talk about multiple first-round picks, that price just seemed way too high, especially when it came out of Indianapolis pretty quickly that Chris Ballard, the GM there, was not going to be giving up that type of draft capital for Carson Wentz. So, when you consider this March 19th deadline with the bonus kicking in that the Eagles have, why should the Bears be in a rush, right? There's no reason to be in a rush to get this done. I think this is a move that maybe you make against the gun later on if some other options haven't worked out. But there's really no reason to rush into it in February. So like last weekend when it was coming out that maybe this thing was going to be done, within minutes, I think it was almost panic in Chicago and a lot of backlash. And now that's maybe died off a little bit now that some time has passed.
It's amazing to me that a franchise like the Bears that's been around forever has never really had an elite quarterback. And I don't think Carson had a passer rating over 100 in 2017 and 2018. The Bears have never had a quarterback with a passer rating over 100, which blows my mind. This is a franchise that's been around since, the 1920s. So I guess it's been – I started covering the Eagles in 87, and I guess the best quarterback I remember them having, I guess, is Cutler. McMahon did what he had to do during in 85, but there's been a lot of Bob Avellini's and Vince Evans and Kyle Orton's and Eric Kramer's. It's been like a franchise long drought at quarterback. It's really amazing.
Yeah, if it's not Cutler, Sid Luckman's usually the guy that they say was the best quarterback in Bears history.
He's available, by the way.
Yeah. Sid Luckman's best season wasn't as good as Mitch Trubisky's worst. So obviously you're comparing eras there, and that's always kind of stupid and silly. But it does kind of put in perspective that this has been a problem forever with the Bears. And it's interesting you bring up Jay Cutler's name because, on one hand, what you just brought up, the history, should be a reason why the Bears should make a move like this. Carson Wentz, you mentioned the passer rating. The Bears have never had a 4,000-yard passer before in a season. That's amazing. Carson Wentz did that.
30 touchdown passes.
Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons to believe that if the Bears did make this move, that Carson Wentz would be right up there among the best quarterbacks that the franchise has ever had. But it's also that Jay Cutler thing that I think gives people pause, because that was a deal where the Bears did give up multiple first-round picks. And while, yes, he was certainly the most talented quarterback they'd ever had, he wasn't good enough and he wasn't a winner, right? He didn't galvanize the locker room. That's something within this Carson Wentz conversation, and I'd love to hear your guys' take on this stuff too, because you know better than me. But when I read these stories coming out of Philly, well-sourced, multiple stories, right? It started a couple of years ago, and now there's a couple in the past couple months here too, sort of doubting the way Carson Wentz galvanized the locker room or questioned his ability to do that, or brought up how maybe he was standoffish sometimes. Yes, there's players that would step up and defend him in that locker room, right? But then it just doesn't seem like the whole locker room is maybe on board with Carson Wentz. Please tell me if I'm wrong. These are just the things I'm reading. But it reminds me of Jay Cutler. I think they're different in personalities. I think Carson Wentz is probably a better guy. But that locker room stuff and the leadership stuff, the things I'm reading out of Philly, I covered almost all of Jay Cutler's career in Chicago. I'm just getting flashbacks to that. And so I think that's where some of the pause coming from Chicago, maybe it's rooted in that.
I get that. If I were Chicago, I'd be more worried about him not getting back to the on-field play more than the behind-the-scenes stuff. I think, there is some truth to a lot of it. But in a new situation, I think the structure around him matters. I think the Eagles did a lot of that to themselves in creating an atmosphere where they kind of allowed a lot of those things to happen. It's funny you mentioned Carson being a 4,000-yard passer. He was actually the first Eagles quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards. So the geek in me right now is realizing that he could do that for the last two franchises to get a 4,000-yard passer.
That's pretty incredible. But it's also here's part of the problem that the Bears are in, because part of the reason why they haven't had good quarterbacks is certainly the structure around those quarterbacks too. I mean, with Cutler's one example is like one year he had a bad offensive line, the next he had a bad offensive coordinator. Then he finally had a good offense under Mark Trestman, and then the Bears had the worst defense they ever had in franchise history to go with it. So it was there was constantly these imperfect situations, right? And he wasn't good enough to transcend those. And I think when you talk about the structure around the quarterback, like he's probably better off going to Indianapolis, to be frank. They got a better offensive line. Frank Reich's proven to have more success on offense so far than Matt Nagy has. That's not a reason the Bears shouldn't make a move like this, because you still need a quarterback. But I also understand it from the other side of it. Like, is Carson Wentz really going to come to Chicago and be any better than he was in Philly? I think it's fair to doubt that.
It's funny, the Cutler – I really like the Cutler comparison because, I mean, how long was he in Denver? 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, 4 years.
And, there was a point where, I think his second or third year, he went to the Pro Bowl, and he was pretty good. Had some pretty good years there early, and then I think it was when Josh McDaniels came in, right? Yeah. So we almost had a repeat of that part of it, Dave. We almost had Josh McDaniels here this year. So it would have been funny if Josh McDaniels ran off both Cutler and Carson, sent them both to Chicago. But I like the comparison. I do think probably Carson's a better guy, but they are kind of parallel careers. I don't think Cutler ever became, the player some expected him to. I'm not sure Carson will. We'll see. But I wonder what the perception of Nick Foles is in Chicago after this year. And the guy's gone from Super Bowl MVP to disaster in Jacksonville to obviously didn't go well in Chicago. He's been with the Chiefs. He's been with the Rams. He's been with the Eagles twice. And he's got a Super Bowl MVP in the middle of it all. What did people think of Nick? Obviously, if he's part of a trade to the Eagles, which has been kind of thrown out there, sounds like people wouldn't be too upset to see him go.
No, I don't think so. It was just so bad this year. But it was one of those things where, as I evaluated it every week, I didn't really put much blame on Nick. Nick Foles obviously has his limitations, but when everything around him is perfect, he can be really good. You could say that about a lot of quarterbacks, right? Probably 95% even of starting quarterbacks need to have the right structure, the right personnel around them. There's very few that transcend that, and those are the Patrick Mahomes, the Aaron Rodgers. Heck, even Tom Brady probably needs to have the right pieces in front of him to a certain extent. But Nick just didn't have that in Chicago, and with his limited mobility, the Bears offensive line had to have been the worst in the NFL for like a good 4 to 5 week stretch there when Nick Foles was starting. But I think that was kind of playing off each other. Like, they had some injuries and a couple guys go down with COVID, and then Nick just couldn't get away from it. So when Mitch came back, a couple things happened. They got a couple guys back on that offensive line, but also Trubisky's mobility made a huge difference too in handling that pressure. It was just not a great situation for Nick Foles to be in. So I just think at this point, first of all, it's one of the most fascinating careers we've ever seen in the NFL, and probably will be like that for a long time. But I also think it's been proven now in Nick's career. Yeah, he went on that run in Philadelphia. You guys know this. He had an outstanding offensive line. He had a running game. He had an offense that was clicking. And that's just wasn't the case in Jacksonville, wasn't the case in Chicago this past year. And I guess I just have some doubts with him going back to Philly potentially in this deal, because a lot of the same problems I think hurt Carson Wentz in 2020 are still going to be problems if Nick Foles is the quarterback there.
Yeah, and I think it kind of translates to Carson potentially going to Chicago, like you mentioned. I mean, a lot of his problems in Philly this year were because the O-line was bad, the weapons weren't there, the offense was broken beyond him, and he couldn't fix it. I did want to ask you about this perception that, Chris Ballard is so thoughtful and he's so patient, whereas I think people around the league kind of look at the Bears as a potential sucker. I think that's probably out there. How's that viewed in Chicago? I guess there was some worry that they would maybe rush into a deal for Carson Wentz. Is that a legitimate fear that they might, in an attempt to rectify their quarterback situation, overpay for Wentz or any of these quarterbacks?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's part of the conversation. I sometimes laugh at this stuff, though, because it's not just this team or this GM. It's in sports in general. It really comes down to whether or not the moves work or not, right? So if Mitch Trubisky had been a good pick, then everybody's applauding Ryan Pace's conviction and being aggressive to go in and get – no one cares about the draft picks he gave up to move up one spot. But with him struggling and it not being a pick that worked out, then he now has this reputation where he's a sucker, right? I mean, to use the word that you used. And I think it just goes back to whether or not the pick worked, right? The Khalil Mack trade was also a situation where he was aggressive and he went out and gave up a lot of draft capital. And I think no one's questioning that move. That he's Khalil Mack. He's a great player. Hasn't quite been as good as he was in 2018, his first year with the Bears, but he's still really, really good if you turn on the tape and watch. So I don't know. I think some of that's fair, but I think it has more to do with the fact that some of these moves haven't worked rather than any kind of fault of his to rush into things. If I will say, though, if this trade had been made last Saturday night when it was rumored to be happening, that would have been something I would have questioned, because it just, again, it goes back to what I said earlier, does not seem like something that you need to rush into and overpay for at this point. Let this play out a little bit more closer into March, maybe that deadline, and then let's see how things line up.
It's funny. We could sit here and talk about all the former Eagles connections in Chicago, like Bill Lazor and Juan Castillo and Flip and everybody. Were you surprised Matt Nagy didn't get fired?
I wasn't. I was a little bit more surprised that maybe Ryan Pace didn't. I'll put it this way: when they lost that 6th game in a row and blowing the lead they blew to the Detroit Lions in the final minutes, a double-digit lead. I thought they were getting fired then, right? I mean, it just seemed like they had to make the move. Not necessarily, I'm not talking about Monday. That's not what the McCaskies do. So it's not like they were going to fire him the next day. But at that point, I had pretty much gotten things ready to be like, all right, we're going to be handling a GM and a coaching search in January. And then they turned things around, and it got to the point where, okay, once you put it more in the big picture perspective, there was an argument for keeping them and keeping continuity. And they did make the playoffs, even though it was because of the extra seed that existed this season. But so when it was all said and done, I actually thought they would be kept. I thought ownership and Vice President Ted Phillips President Ted Phillips did a bad job of explaining everything when they came out. And that's why the Bears got all that heat at the end of the season. But I actually, not only was I not surprised at the end that they weren't fired, I actually think it's the right move, to be honest with you, because I do think there's an argument for continuity, and you don't want to become one of these teams that's constantly churning and starting over every 3 years. It's so hard to dig out of that.
Yeah, that's something we talked about here in Philly about, when the Eagles fired Doug Peterson, there's the argument for continuity. I'm going to put you on the spot, Adam. 2021 opening day in Chicago. Who do you think the quarterback is?
That is such a hard question right now.
That's what I would do.
Sid Luckman, yeah.
Yes, Sid Luckman, Jay Cutler, maybe. You know what? When I look at the options, I think I might actually have to put Carson Wentz at the top of the list. Like, if you're going to set odds for who's the starter in week one, he seems like the most likely candidate at this point. I could see a deal still getting done at some point. I just don't think that the Bears need to. When you look at the contract, you look at all the variables involved, I don't think they have to be giving up a ton. So wait it out a little bit. I tell you this, it won't be Mitch Trubisky. And the only way it's Nick Foles is if they strike out on all these trade options, free agent options, and the free agent options aren't even that good. And they end up drafting somebody in the first round. And, like, I don't know, Trey Lance or something, he's not going to be ready to go week one. Then maybe that's a situation where Nick Foles is starting. But I really don't think that's going to end up being the case.
It's funny that Nick Foles and Carson Wentz both have a better chance of being the starting quarterback in Chicago than Philly.
Yeah, that is true, actually.
Hey, I'll tell you this. I was banging the table last year at the draft. The Bears should have drafted Jalen Hurts. For months, I thought it was a pick that made sense. The Bears had 2 second-round picks, and they didn't pull the trigger. He went to Philly instead. I know it surprised everybody, but I kept saying late in the season, Nick Foles had struggled. Mitch Trubisky had been benched. I'm like, wouldn't it be nice to have a guy like Jalen Hurts to develop and give you some hope, right? Some hope. Isn't that what you need? Right now, the Bears don't have much hope at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and that pick would have made a lot more sense to the Bears than the Eagles at the time. Adam, we thank you for your time. You can follow Adam Hoge at Adam Hoge on Twitter. That's Hoge. Thanks for your time, man, and maybe we'll talk to you again if this deal ends up happening.
Absolutely. We'd love to do it. Great talking to you guys.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks to Adam Hoge. That was great stuff from him. We want to talk about Jalen Hurts. And he brought up Jalen Hurts as he thought that the Bears should have drafted him. The Eagles did. And unless they keep Carson, which we don't think is going to happen, or unless they draft a quarterback, which I guess is possible, probably unlikely, it looks like Jalen Hurts is going to be the Eagles starter going into 2021. Kind of a weird deal. We only saw 4 games of him last season as a rookie. What do you make of Jalen Hurts? I mean, what do you think he can do in this year? What are your expectations if he's a starter?
Yeah, it's tough to take what he did in those 3.5 games and draw any conclusions, just because all hell was breaking loose around him. The O-line was in disarray. He hadn't played in the preseason. He only played a couple snaps here and there on gadget plays, really. I saw enough good things to think he has a chance to be a player. I saw a chance. I think that the first half, second half thing was really weird. He was terrible in the second half. He was great in the first half of all his games except the last one, the Washington game. I think he's got a chance to be a player. I think people make a mistake when they dismiss anybody after 4 games or 3.5 games, quarterback or otherwise. He's a 22-year-old kid who didn't have a training camp or OTAs, didn't have preseason games, was in a difficult situation in that room with a veteran quarterback who was struggling. And he did some good things. He had a couple games where he threw for over 300 yards. The fumbles are an issue, but you can fix fumbles. He threw a couple of interceptions in a half in which they threw the ball 39 times and ran it twice. I don't worry about that. I look at the positives, and I wrote about that this week. The 4 Eagles quarterbacks who have played a lot as rookies and a lot in their second year, Randall, Donovan, Nick Foles, and Carson Wentz, all improved dramatically in year 2 from year 1, no matter what they did in year 1. And it's, coaches always talk about that big jump from year 1 to year 2. And for quarterbacks, that's what you look for. You look for that progress because, I went through some of these guys. I mean, Troy Aikman threw like 29 interceptions and 11 touchdowns. I mean, some of these guys as rookies, it's a really tough situation because if you're a rookie quarterback playing, that means you're probably on a bad team. So things are bad around you. You probably don't have good receivers, which Jalen Hurts didn't have. he didn't have a running game to speak of to make things easier for him. But when I looked at the composite improvement of Randall, Donovan, Nick, and Carson, and those 4 quarterbacks on the average, I'm not going to go through each guy, but on the average, as rookies, they completed 53.6% of their passes, 8 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and a passer rating of 62. In year 2, and you got to remember that the stats are a little skewed because Nick Foles in year 2, that was 2013. He had one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen, but it was year 2, and that kind of demonstrates how guys can improve. He was 1-6 as a rookie. He did some good things, but he was 1-6. A new coach, and he throws 27 touchdowns and 2 picks. So the composite second-year numbers for those guys: 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a passer rating of 93. So guys get better. Guys can get better. There's no doubt in my mind if Jalen Hurts is the quarterback that he's going to play more consistently than he did in 2020. I don't know how much more, but I certainly wouldn't, dismiss him at this point. I wouldn't, I wouldn't say he doesn't have a chance to be a really good player, because he does. And when you look at the things he did that were positives, he threw the ball better than I expected. I thought he was in command of the huddle, as a young 22-year-old kid in a difficult situation. He really commanded the huddle well. He showed a lot of confidence. He ran the ball, and you can even see him growing as the month went on, running the ball smarter, not taking off every time the play broke down, looking to throw. He did some good things. He did enough good things that I think he's got a chance to be a player.
Yeah, and that's fair. I don't think anyone really knows. I thought it was striking that 2 of the best quarterback seasons we've seen from the Eagles in recent history were guys in their second years, Nick and Carson. I mean, 2 all-time Eagles seasons, honestly.
Right.
And with Hurts, I look at his rookie season, and such a small sample size, but he did a lot of really good things, and he did some things that I think you worry about. And it was kind of a lot of what we saw from him was what was kind of the report on him coming out of college was, this incredible pocket awareness and a feeling. It was a feeling that we didn't see from Carson. It was really striking to go from Carson to Jalen last year, because Wentz was, seeing a blitzer and still getting hit by him, whereas Jalen was really feeling the pressure even from behind, like eyes in the back of his head, able to escape, knowing when to step up, when the sidestep, all those things. This like inherent knowledge of what to do in the pocket was there with Hurts, but the accuracy was an issue, and that was something that it was a fear of his, or a fear of scouts when he was coming out in the draft, was that he still, he had really improved at Oklahoma as a passer, but still needed a lot of work in that area. And I think that's still true. I still think he needs a lot of work as a passer. It doesn't mean he won't get there. The Eagles, if they have the right coaching structure in place, he has the physical tools. There's no reason to think he wouldn't be able to, but there are still questions about Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And like any quarterback who's only played 3.5 games, there's going to be a lot of questions. But usually when you see some extended stretches of high caliber play, that guy's going to have a chance to become more consistent and to stretch those good, periods out into full games and into a season. So I think he'll have a good career. I think he'll, if he's not here, he'll be somewhere. I think I think there's something there. Is he going to be a Pro Bowler? Is he going to be a playoff quarterback? Is he going to win a championship? I don't know, but I think he's got a chance to be something special. I really do.
Yeah, we'll see. And John Clark reported that Hurts next month is planning to work out with some young receivers from the team. That's a good sign. He did that a little bit last year. Kind of a weird situation last year. Him and Carson were both in Houston around the same time and both worked out with some of their teammates. But that's a good sign. I mean, he has those leadership qualities. Guys really seem to gravitate toward him last year. You would anticipate that'll happen again this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, there's certain guys, like when Tebow was here, when Michael Vick was here, there's certain guys that young guys just really, they're like in awe of them. And Jalen Hurts won a national title when he was 19. He's got that he's got that swag about him, and I love his attitude. I love his mentality. He's a total team guy, who truly, genuinely wants to win more than anything. I think that was true of Carson as well. But he's got that swag. He's got something. He's got a presence about him. And, I think when you're playing in front of 110,000 people in a national championship game at 18 or 19 and play at a high level, like you've been through that, it's not like the NFL is this big intimidating thing. So he's played it at high level at 2 schools. I'm really curious to see. I think if he's not the guy, I don't think it's, if they find somebody better, if they draft somebody, if they sign somebody, if they trade for somebody, I don't think it's the end of the world. But I'd like to see Jalen Hurts get a season. I'd like to see him as the guy in training camp and, as the guy in preseason games and going into a season. This is my team. I'd like to see what he can do.
Yeah, and to me, that's another reason to get the Carson Wentz trade done earlier rather than later, because I'd like to see that too. I'd like to see Nick Sirianni really get a chance to cater the offense to the player, because he does have such a unique set of skills that I don't want it to be cookie cutter. This is our offense and here comes Jalen Hurts. I want him to cater it to Hurts, and it seems like that's something Sirianni wants to do. I want to give him that chance to do it.
And I also think he's going to benefit from, presumably, if Brandon Brooks is back healthy, if Jason Kelce returns and plays another year, if we see Jordan Mailata keep progressing, he's got Stout back. If Lane Johnson can come back healthy, this could be, again, a really good O-line. And then if you have a coach that's committed to running the ball, which I think, at least judging from Frank Reich, Nick Sirianni is going to probably be a guy that believes in at least establishing a run to some extent, which Doug at some points just didn't even pretend to do. I think all that stuff's going to help Jalen or whoever the quarterback is. It's going to I think we're going to see next year, I could be wrong about this, but I think we're going to see just how, just kind of how much Doug's play calling deteriorated, I think, during this past year, and how much the pass run ratio, the lack of talent at wide receiver, how much that really held everybody back. I have a hunch we'll kind of look at, I'm not saying they're going to have a great year because I don't think the talent's there, but I do think we'll see just how bad. We'll kind of get a sense, wow, last year was really, really bad. Doug just had a terrible year.
Yeah. You brought up the running backs, which is a good place here to get to stay or go, and that's where we start. We'll kind of go through these quick. We have 3 positions today, and we'll start with running back, and we go through them alphabetically. Corey Clement.
Yeah, I have Corey going. I think Corey's a guy that will always kind of, have a special place in everybody's heart in Philadelphia. Hard to believe he's going to year 5.
Amazing.
It's amazing. But, I think he's a guy that you have a new coach. The Super Bowl doesn't mean anything to Nick Sirianni. Corey's a free agent. I would think Corey might want to go somewhere where at least has a chance to play on offense a little bit. Here, he's just going to be a special teamer and an emergency back. So I think he's gone.
Yeah, I kind of even wondered if last year he wouldn't have been better off going somewhere else. I think that should definitely happen now. Elijah Holyfield, we didn't get to see in 2020. I was a little disappointed by that.
Yeah, in fact, the next 2 guys, I'll package them, Elijah Holyfield and Jason Huntley. I would have liked to see, like, you bring back Jordan Howard, and you have these young backs that you want to learn something about. And then Jordan Howard's getting some carries when, I wanted to see what Elijah Holyfield was all about. I want to see if Jason Huntley could be a guy who might be able to help. So now we don't know anything about him. But again, new coach, these are guys that fall off trees. Huntley's the one guy who he's a little interesting to me. He was a draft pick. He had a really good career in college where he caught the ball a lot. So I think he'll be a guy that kind of bounces around the league and maybe gets a chance somewhere, but I don't think he'll be here.
He's actually the one that I decided to keep. That's where we differed. I like Jason Huntley, at least what I saw from him in college. I didn't see anything of him last year, but it was a tough situation. He got here after final cuts. He was a roster claim, so he's learning the new offense and he'll have to learn another offense now. But he has a lot of the characteristics that I based on what we've seen from Indianapolis, at least, that this new coaching staff will like. So he's one of the guys I'm really excited if there are spring practices to see out there and see how they're using him. Nyheim Hines, who we know from Indianapolis, he's not exactly that player, but there's some carryover with the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And I think he could maybe find that type of role. I don't know really, but I went out on a limb and kept him. Jordan Howard, I don't think we need to spend too much time. We both have him going. Talk about weird careers. I mean, this is a guy who was among the league leaders in rushing yards the first 3 years of his career, got off to a hot start his first 8 games in Philly, and ever since he's been almost non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, he got hurt. Didn't play the second half of the year. I think he played 1 snap, and then goes to Miami, averages like 1 yard, 1 yard a game per carry, and 1 yard per game. Ends up on the Eagles practice squad. Very strange. Running back happens to running backs, though. They have these 1,000-yard seasons early in their career, and by the time they're 26, 27, they're done. And I'm not saying he's done, but it's kind of on that track when you're on a practice squad at that point in your career. He's not going to be here.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Adrian Killens, who was kind of a training camp darling last year. We thought he had a chance to make the roster. He didn't, but he stuck around, and he got 1 carry for minus 12 yards, which was unfortunate. Look, maybe if he has an incredible training camp, you can see why a coach would like him. He's super fast and he has some ability, but I don't think either of us see it.
Yeah, my only thing is I hope he doesn't have to retire with a career rushing average of minus 12 yards a carry. That'd be awful.
That'd be bad. You'd feel for him. Hopefully he gets a chance. It probably won't be here.
No.
Miles Sanders, I don't know if you've heard of him. We both have him staying. He's obviously going to be here. I think year 3 is – I think you want to see a breakout year. I think a lot of people expected it last year, and he got off to a slow start. He was hurt. He had some injuries along the way. He couldn't catch the ball all of a sudden. And now he's in a situation where new head coach who might run the ball more, but he loses Deuce Staley, who had been kind of like a mentor, father figure, tough running back coach for him. I don't know what to expect, but I think we need to see a breakout year from Miles Sanders.
Yeah, Deuce made the point. I talked to Deuce about him not too long ago when Deuce we were doing his farewell letter, and he said, he pointed out that Miles, was hurt. He didn't have an off season his first year, and obviously there were no OTAs or anything this past year. He said he really hasn't had that off season, and hopefully this year he has it. He's with the Lions. He's with the Lions now, but he thinks he thinks Miles is going to be a superstar. He really does. He thinks he's going to be so much better. He says he's just this past year really learned to work and learned to, to put in the time. And he had a kind of a strange year this year. He had the 3 really long runs of 70+ yards, but he didn't have any other runs over 20 yards, which is weird. He didn't have a lot of chances. And he had a bad offensive line. So you take that for what it's worth. But I think he's going to be a star. I do.
Yeah, you mentioned the O-line for Jalen Hurts. Imagine Miles behind that O-line. It's exciting.
How many carries did he have where he just had no chance? I mean, he just had nowhere to run.
Yeah, and it happened far too often. The last one, Boston Scott. He's actually an exclusive rights free agent. So it means he's basically going to be back if they want him back. And I think they should want him back. Yeah,
I like Boston. I think he's almost underutilized. I mean, obviously, if you're not using your starting back, you can't use your backup too much. But good receiver, good short yardage back, good locker room guy. I like having him on I'd like having him on my team.
Sure. Let's move to linebackers, which is always a fun position to talk about with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Let's just say they all go except a couple guys.
Yeah. Well, you guys might hear some new names here, which is exciting. Joe Bacci? Bacci?
I don't know how to say his name. He's not going to be here. I don't know. What can Joe Bacci do to win a job? No, he's gone.
Yeah, he was a guy who was here last year, played a few snaps, 18 total. He's not going to be here. Sean Bradley, we both think he will be here. Second-year player, no reason to get rid of him. At least a special teams contributor, right?
Yeah, and I think him and Davion Taylor, who we'll touch on in a minute, I think they probably suffered. I think that some of these rookies suffered so much from not having the offseason. But, I think in year two, you expect to see Sean Bradley compete for some playing time on defense and go out and play on special teams. Local kid.
He was a guy I wish they would have played last year. I mean, there was really no reason not to play him. The team was all, we talked about it during the season, but them being in that bogus NFC East race really hurt the development of a lot of these young guys. Sean Bradley should have been playing. There's no reason not to play Sean Bradley.
Yeah, well, most teams that are 4-11-1 aren't like fighting for a playoff spot. So, it hurt because they had to play these older guys just because. And I mean, it was probably the right thing to do. It was just an unfortunate set of circumstances. So,
but my point was, I don't know how much worse a lot of these young guys would have been than the older guys taking snaps from in front of them.
Yeah, that's fair.
But
he's a guy I'm excited to see.
Yeah, me too. Next guy, TJ Edwards, who we both like quite a bit. He's not an athletic specimen. He's not slow. It's funny, we talk about TJ Edwards like he's a turtle. I mean, he's fast enough to play in the NFL. He's just not he's not Davion Taylor fast, right? He's not super fast.
I mean, he's a thumper, and he's physical, and he's kind of an old school linebacker. He's not a guy who's going to be here for 10 years. He's a guy that's going to be here until they get somebody better. But I haven't seen any urgency on the part of Howie Roseman to get anybody better. So he'll be here.
Yeah, and I like TJ Edwards because he's always in the right spot. You can rely on TJ Edwards. He's not going to make a ton of flash plays, but he's going to be in the right spot. He's going to fill his gap, and he's going to tackle the guy. And that's a hell of a lot more than some of these linebackers did last year.
Like the next one.
Yeah, the next one. Nate Gary, who, I mean, I don't know if there's a player disliked more by the fan base than Nate Gary. And a lot of that, to me, is a little unfair for Nate, not by the fans, but for Nate, because he was put in this role of being an every down linebacker when everyone else saw that he clearly wasn't. And he's not going to be like, you know what, Ken Flagel, I don't think I'm ready for this. He's going to play, but they put him in a tough spot. And the organization's refusal to get better talent in here made Nate Gary their top linebacker. And then they compounded it by not realizing he wasn't any good.
Yeah, I thought it was not a good sign that he got hurt like week 7 or week 8. And nobody ever asked Doug like how he was doing or when he was going to be back. It was almost like Doug he was just forgotten. He was just like wiped off the face of the earth. I don't think we knew when he got hurt that he wasn't going to play again the rest of the year. But we just never saw him again. He was never mentioned again. And when that happens, that's not usually a good sign for your future. So
it's a shame too, because like if he was just a special teamer, he's a pretty good special teamer. And
what was he, a 5th round pick?
5th round pick, converted safety. So like if that was his role, people would look at Nate Gary a lot differently right now. And we might keep him. He might be a stay, because if you're paying a minimum for a guy who's a special teamer, a good locker room guy for the most part, as far as we know, like it wouldn't be a bad thing, but I just don't know how you can go from him being a starter to then completely gone.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough to do. He's not going to be here.
Yeah. Next one, Duke Riley. I kind of went back and forth on this one a little bit. We ended up both saying he goes. I thought, he was a special teams captain, and linebacker is the one position where you need special team linebackers. You need guys who their job is just to be special teamers. But a new coaching staff, you think that they're going to find their own guys to fill those roles.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking with him. I went back and forth with him too. And again, I think he's just, they got to get better. They got to get better than Duke Riley's. Now, whether how he can do that, I don't know. Kind of doubt it. But I think that whole kind of level of he's okay. They got to get better than that. So I'm in the goes camp with Duke Riley.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the new coaching staff does to that position, because I think it goes beyond Jim Schwartz, this philosophy on linebackers. It's clearly an organizational thing, but I wonder if any influence from the new coaching staff would change it. I don't know the answer to that, but I mean, they couldn't really put less into it than they have. I mean, I know they used a 3rd-round pick, but they used it on a guy who wasn't going to play. We'll get to him in a minute. Alex Singleton, exclusive rights free agent, ended up playing really well. I don't know if he's ever going to play at that level again. It was amazing to watch, but he'll be back and he'll get a chance to do it.
Yeah, he's their best linebacker. I mean, he's the only guy in this whole list. Well, I guess Davion Taylor is definitely going to be back, but there's not a lot of these guys that you can say they will be back, and Alex Singleton is one. But like all these guys, every one of them, was a late-round pick or a mid-round pick or a free agent. Alex Singleton came from Canada, was never drafted. He's a high-effort guy. He's fun to watch. I mean, he's probably like the most fun linebacker they've had to watch since, I guess Bradham and Camus and Kendricks, for a year there were pretty good. But I like Singleton. He'll be here. Everybody else, I have no idea. But and they lucked into him. Let's face it. I mean, they did. He was on the practice squad last year. They didn't even play him the first 6 weeks of the season. They had no idea what they had in Alex Singleton. Yeah,
if Nate Gary doesn't get hurt, he probably never gets that chance. He played really well. He's an exclusive rights free agent, so he'll be back. Rashad Smith, he's gone. Davion Taylor.
Poor Rashad.
I don't want to.
He watches the podcast, and he's like, what are they going to say about me? And we get to Rashad Smith, and Dave's like, Rashad Smith, he's gone. Let's move on.
That was mean. That was too mean. Rashad Smith, I don't know. I really don't. He's the Joe Bocci. I don't know.
He actually played 23 snaps in the last game of the season, which is crazy because, I'm not sure how closely I was watching it, but he, he actually began the season with the Cowboys.
Yeah, he did. And I don't know. Who knows? Maybe one of these guys will come to camp and with a full offseason really wow you. I just don't know anything about them in the NFL. And it's probably not a good sign that they wait to play you until the game they're trying to lose.
That's right. To keep his old team out of the playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah. The last guy is Davion Taylor, who, look, we all knew it was a project, and it turned out to be a project. He barely played as a rookie, and then he got hurt late in the year. So any chance he would have had to maybe play in that regular season finale, he lost. I don't know what he is. No idea.
Nor I. And they got to find out. I mean, 3rd-round pick, year 2. It's time.
And late 3rd-round pick, but still a 3rd-round pick. I mean, well, I think the 3rd round is an area in the draft where there's a really big difference between high 3rd round and late 3rd.
Just trying to protect Howie. He was a 3rd-round pick. Stop trying to protect you.
That's always my MO, to protect Howie. I don't know. And we all questioned at the time. We knew it was a project. And I remember asking Howie, are you okay drafting a guy in the 3rd round that you know is not going to play? And he said, I don't. How do you know he's not going to play? We don't draft guys to not play. And then he didn't play. So, ideally you'd get more out of a guy. You have a rookie contract. You have 4 years when you draft a guy. Now you have the rights to hopefully extend him if he plays well, but all you're guaranteed is those 4 years, and you waste one of them, off the bat. Now I don't have any confidence he's going to really play this year. I don't know. You hope that
I'd like to see what he's all about. We really don't know, like you said.
Yeah. And we know he's athletic. There were glimpses. There was the one play where remember the play where he ran down Lamar Jackson? I mean, He's fast, straight line speed. I just don't know how it translates yet.
Yep.
The last position we'll look at today is defensive tackles. We'll start off with Javon Hargrave, who just financially we know will be back. I mean, I guess they could trade him, but I don't think they're going to trade him. He's going to be back next year.
He'll be back, and he was okay. I thought he was okay the second half of the year. Took him a while to get going. Gave him a lot of money, so he's got to be better than okay.
I thought he was better than okay the second half of the year.
I thought he was okay. And I think we kind of, our expectations for everybody were really low at that point.
And he was disruptive the second half of the year. There was a good 6-game stretch where he was arguably their most disruptive defensive lineman.
I think that's true. But I also don't think he played like a guy that you just gave a $40 million 3-year deal to.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. You're right. We knew it would kind of be a process. He was a guy last year who you could kind of see it going that way because he got hurt. He missed all the training camp, and he's trying to go from – I don't think some people realize how difficult that transition is from being in a really passive 3-4 to a really aggressive 4-3. It's like a completely different position, and it took him a long time to flip it. Once he did, I think we started to see him play better. There should be high expectations on him going into this season.
Yeah, so he'll be back.
Yeah. Trayvon Hester – it was kind of a shame he didn't get to play this year. The double doink hero. I don't think he's going to be back. You don't either.
When a defensive tackle's claim to fame is blocking a field goal, it's not a good sign. I mean, good that he did it, but yeah.
Yeah. Fletcher Cox, we both have him back here, and it's funny. We both wrote a similar thing. Like, we don't think it's going to happen, but on a team in this situation, with how expensive he is, how much cap space he takes up, if a team calls you and offers you the world for him, you'd have to consider it.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's true with almost everybody on this team. But again, he's 30. I mean, made a Pro Bowl, 6th in a row. I don't think he's quite the player he was a couple of years ago. He's felt pretty good. But, I think we're at the point where in the next couple of years, depending on how this team progresses, they're going to be looking at guys like Fletcher Cox saying, what do we want to do here? So I think he'll be here this year, but beyond that, who knows? Yeah,
I think he might be a candidate for a modest extension. Because he has such a big cap hit this year. If you can you can really do a lot. You can almost eliminate that cap hit by giving him a big bonus. Not eliminate it, but you can really bring it down. And they're kind of in a cap crunch. He's someone who you're probably going to want here for at least, the next 4 years, probably. So,
thanks.
Yeah, so you can probably make a move like that. Next one, Malik Jackson. We both think he's gone. They already pretty much announced it by the way they restructured his contract. They're going to cut him. They're going to move on. Kind of a disappointment.
Huge disappointment. I mean, got hurt the first year. Okay, that happens. But his second year, flashes here and there, but really there wasn't a lot. There wasn't a lot there.
Yeah, he got off to a good start this year or last year.
He was okay. I mean, every game he would make like one splash play, but he really flattened out after about week 6. Mm-hmm. His best game was probably the last game of the year against Washington when it didn't matter. They paid him $20 million and got half a dozen plays.
Yeah.
He's gone, and disappointing signing.
Yeah. T.Y. McGill, who you sent me earlier the list of his transactions in the NFL. Unbelievable. 41 transactions, is that right?
41. And that includes, getting promoted from the practice squad to the game day roster and all that. But still, he's a guy that's bounced around the league. He's good enough that he'll always be like on the fringes of somebody's roster or practice squad, but he's never going to be a guy that really finds a home and finds a role. So, he gave me a few good snaps here and there when he played, but not a guy that fits into their future.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to have those borderline players, he's 28. He's not old, but you probably want to get a little younger.
I would think so.
Hassan Ridgeway is an interesting one because
I actually wrote the whole thing like he was going to stay, and then I changed it.
You did the old Jeff Lurie, Andy Reid press conference.
I did.
But the opposite. I actually kept him, and he's a tough one to figure out because he's still young. He's 26, or maybe just turned 27. He's relatively young.
26, yeah.
He's not going to cost you anything. I mean, I think if you sign him, it's probably a vet minimum deal. I don't know if anyone else is is going to give him any more than that. When he's been on the field, he's been pretty good. The problem is he can't stay on the field. He's played 7 games in each of the last 2 years. The year before that, he played 5 in Indy, so you can't rely on him. I kept him, though, because I figure you give him a vet minimum deal, nothing guaranteed. He's a backup player behind your top 2 defensive tackles, and he's still young enough that if he turns it around and can stay healthy, you might have a piece for the future. So I kept him for that reason.
Yeah, I was going to for all those reasons you just said, but then I keep thinking this is a guy that's played 19 games in the last 3 years, and I just don't know if you can count on him. And like you said, even if he gets hurt again financially, it's not a huge loss because you're going to sign him to a cheapo deal. The fact that he was with the Colts when Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon were there could be a factor. But I don't know. I just think that they're going to move on. That's just my hunch. I just think they're going to look at this guy just keeps getting hurt, and then then we have to get the next guy going. A hunch. Could go either way, but I got him going.
Okay, makes sense. The last one, Raekwon Williams, who was an undrafted rookie out of Michigan State. I like that you're keeping him. That's interesting to me. I had him going, but there were some good signs from him last year.
Yeah, for me, it was going to be either Ridgeway or Williams. I was going to keep one of them, and I just decided originally I was going to keep Ridgeway, then I changed my mind. I kept Raekwon Williams. Younger, he's 23. I just think this is the kind of guy they need to build a roster around. Younger guys, rookie contracts. I mean, not that Ridgeway would be a huge contract, but just these younger guys that have some upside. I don't think Hassan Ridgeway will ever be any better than what we saw him when he's been healthy the couple of years here. I think Raekwon Williams has a chance to be a solid rotational defensive tackle. And if I'm going to have one or the other, I'd rather have the guy who doesn't have a history of injuries and is 5 years or 3 years younger.
I'm fine with that. I liked your take on that one. All right, that was our 3 positions today. We'll keep doing that. And you can check out all the stories on NBCSportsPhilly.com. We want to thank Adam Hoge for joining us. That was great. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, do us a favor. And let me just finish this. Rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit like and subscribe. And now you may talk.
When are we going to do general manager stay or go?
If that's what we would do, it's much different than what we know Jeff Lurie is going to keep doing.
We should do that. Okay. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Was that all that was? Okay. You got anything else before we do anything this weekend? You got anything fun planned?
Probably shoveling snow like I do every weekend.
It snows every day now. I hate it. I had an eye doctor appointment this morning. I woke up to see like 3 inches of snow outside, and I was like, I got to go and shovel. And
it's white everywhere. It's white. That's normal.
I did do this a new test at the eye doctor. It's like a retina scan that I've never done that before. And you like lean real close in. He didn't tell me what it was going. Just this bright flash of green light. I thought I was blind for a second. He didn't warn me that it was going to
Oh, we should mention that the Eagles hired an assistant special teams coach.
They did. What's his name?
The mayor of Marlton's son. That's all I know. Randy Williams.
Yeah. What's his name?
Randy Brown's.
Randy Brown's son, Tyler Brown. Yeah. So local ties, kind of cool. Sure. My former mayor's son is the new Eagles special teams.
I was trying to get you to talk about Mayor Marlton.
All right, we're gonna wrap this up. For Reuben, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you next week. Maybe we'll have news. Maybe we won't.